I have Professor Hans Bakker with me, who is one of the most renowned uh, experts of the history of the Vakatakas. Right now, he is ERC curator, that is European Research Commission's curator at the British Museum. He is more renowned for his work called The Vakatakas Hindu Iconology, that was published in 1997. It changed many ideas on the history of the Vakatakas that was shrouded into mystery until a few decades back. Some of his landmark research findings have offloaded the focus that was entirely on the subject of the Ajanta, and now we come to know that the Vakatakas had a much greater role to play than popularly we think as. His work is also very much noted for his critical additions on Skanda Puran, and more about his work I would like to ask himself, Professor Bakker. What a great honor for me to be able to meet you and learn about your research on the Vakatakas. And therefore, may I begin asking you, what is your current area of research?
My current area of research actually is to trace an ancient trading route from the ocean, Indian Ocean, through Baroda, through Ujjain, up to Mathura and Kannauj in the 5th and 6th century. Because we think that along this trading route, this Pashupata religion, the Reformation within the Shaiva religion, was traveling slowly up to north and then spreading over the Ganga valley to the east. So we are looking for ancient remains of the 5th and 6th century that are related to this Pashupata religion along this track from Broj or Barukhacha through Ujjain up to Mathura and Kannauj. So that is my major concern at the moment.
May I start by asking you, many of the people in India have not even heard of the Vakatakas. Who were the Vakatakas? What do we know about them, sir?
Well, one major question that nobody can answer at the moment is where did they come from? All of a sudden, in the 4th and 5th century, we have inscriptions of the Vakatakas, and the first major branch of the Vakataka dynasty settled in Vidarbha.
In
Vidarbha.
Vidarbha.
But whether they were originally to that country or came from other countries, we don't know. Probably they came from abroad, but some people say they come from South India. They came from South India. Others think that they came from the Vindhya region.
Mm.
I think personally they came from the Vindhyas because their first king is called Vindhya Shakti.
Mm.
But in the fourth, at the end of the 4th century and during the first half of the 5th century, they all of a sudden were very prominent in the upper Deccan area of India. And then they disappeared again completely.
How did they occupy suddenly this central part of the Deccan?
Well, yes. Well, that is a major question. We have done some. My personal opinion is that they were new to the area of Vidarbha, and before they came there was not very much urban settlements around. Maybe small agricultural communities where they set themselves up as rulers, local rulers, and were very successful in that. So before that, I don't think that they were a continuation of the Satavahana dynasty. They were something new in the 4th century, and they set themselves up, and they left us not only inscriptions, but they left us a lot of archaeological material, sculptures, etc.
Which is the rough area? What is the a tentative contour of their dominions?
Well, there are two branches, at least we know two branches. Inscriptions speak of more, of 4 sons, but we know of 2 branches, and one is in Vidarbha, and the other is around more to the west.
Vatsagulma.
Yes, Vatsagulma. But that branch is coming to the fore in the middle of the 5th century, when we have the evidence of the Ajanta caves. Before that day, we don't know very much about them, but we have a lot of archaeological material of the senior branch in Vidarbha in the first half of the 5th century. So these 2 branches are, well, they are, in a way they are branches, and in a way they are completely separate, I think. But they both call themselves Vakatakas. And only in the past, through the pedigree, they link up to one another.
So you spent decades studying the art and archaeology and heritage of the Vakatakas. What is it, what is so important about the Vakatakas that attracted your attention?
Well, what is important about them, I think, is that they left us with a wonderful collection of art objects, sculptures, the caves, of course, of the Vatsagulma branch in Ajanta. And they were major players in the history of India. I mean, that they were part of the Gupta period, and they were connected to the imperial Guptas of northern India. So they were an historic, for 1 century, they were a major player in the historic field. So that is an important thing by themselves, but in my view, more important is what they have left to us. And what they have left to us is wonderful sculptures and wonderful paintings in the Ajanta caves.
Do you think the Vakatakas of Vatsagulma had any direct or indirect role to play in the development of Ajanta caves?
They certainly had a role to play there, because we have their inscriptions, although we do not have an inscription of the Vakataka king himself in Ajanta. That is very sadly missing, actually. And the impression we have from the inscriptions of the Vatsagulma branch is that they were not particularly Buddhist kings, but they allowed people in their court who were Buddhist to set up the caves, to patronize the caves, and to divert all kinds of funds to excavate the caves and beautify the caves. Yeah, so they were indirectly involved in setting up the Ajanta caves. Whether the king himself and his family were very much involved, that's an open question, because we have no evidence for that. No.
One of the mysteries about the Vakatakas, whether it is the Nandivardhan branch or the Vatsagulma branch, one of is regarding the sociological condition. During your research, have you found some clear ideas? What kind of society developed during that?
Yeah, well, that's an important question. I think they started from a very simple and small-scale agricultural society. And I think that the eastern branch, the Vidarbha branch, remained more or less a small-scale agricultural society, but well organized, so well organized that there was a surplus of money and funding, so they can build their big capital and temples on the Ramagiri Hill and in Mansar, things like that. But the impression is that it was an agricultural society. The things might be different with the other branch in Vatsagulma, because they were, Ajanta of course is on a trade route, and it is Buddhistic. So they were connected to trade and to Buddhist monks, and they were more open to connection to the north and to the south of Ajanta, and maybe even international, because in Ajanta picture pictures or paintings, we have some images of representatives of people from abroad India. So they were clearly part of a bigger world. The Vidarbha Vakatakas were not so much part of a bigger world, although they were very closely connected to the Guptas, and that is probably one of the sources of their power. Yeah.
Professor Bakker, I also was wondering during my research about the state of economy during the Vakatakas.
Yeah.
Did they mint coins? They had.
Well, that's another question that's popping up again and again in Vakataka studies, because if they had coins, they did not have many coins. They had maybe copper and lead coins they have in the later period. Some people have argued with good reasons that in the middle of the 5th century they were issuing copper coins, but no comparison to the Gupta coinage. No gold coins, no silver coins. So therefore that is one of the reasons why I think it was an agricultural society. They had no need for coins that much. While in Vatsagulma and Adyanta, of course, they were part of a bigger national trade work where they could use coinage of other dynasties if needed, if it was not simply an exchange of goods. But the Vidarbha Vakatakas, they might have minted some coins at the end of their rule, maybe to finance their army to fight their enemies, but it was not an integral part of their economy for a long period, that is for sure. It's maybe only at the end. Yeah.
In your opinion, how do we recount the heritage of the Vakatakas in terms of art and culture and patronage? Which are the most salient things that come to our mind when we think of Vakataka patronage?
Well, I think most people will think of the Ajanta caves, that's for sure. And they are, of course, a world monument. I mean, they are a stunning monument. And so that is one major thing. But on the other hand, in the eastern part, in Vidarbha, recently, in the last 25 years, many new things were found, like not only on the Ramagiri itself, but also at the foot near the village Mansar, which is of top level art, actually, really good comparison to the Gupta art, which is not completely different from the Adyanta caves, which was Buddhist caves, and these are images found by unearthing a complete temple and a complete residence palace. So this is really the heritage of the Vakatakas, these two things.
This entire gamut of patronage appears to be more toward the so-called quote-unquote Hindu art.
Yes.
And the ones that we have, the Buddhist art, where we find no direct inscriptional evidence.
No, not of the king, at least.
Not of the kings.
But of people of the court, of course.
So, and what do we make out about the sociological and theological condition of the times as far as patronage is concerned?
Well, there you also have to distinguish again between the eastern and the western branch of the Vakatakas. The eastern ones were clearly what one could call Hindu. They were either Shaiva or Vaishnava, and the Vaishnava element was brought in by the marriage of Rudrasena with this Prabhavati Gupta princess of the daughter of Chandragupta. So she was a staunch Vaishnava and built some Vaishnava monuments and left some Vaishnava testimonies in her inscriptions. The Vakatakas originally were Shaiva, and as soon as Pravarasena died, Pravarasena himself was a Shaiva actually, so her son was again Shaiva. So it's only Rudrasena II and Prabhavati who are clearly Bhagavatas or Vaishnavas. The rest is clearly Shaiva. The other branch is more complicated because the information we have of the other branch of the Vakatakas, they seem to be not to be Buddhist, in my view. They seem to be above religion. I mean, they were actually just following the Dharma and they allowing different types of religion in their realm. Personally, there might have been Shaivas, some of them, at least the name indicates that. But we have not much information about that. No.
What kind of administrative structure they had? Was it
Also, that might be very different in the two branches. Actually, we're speaking about two kingdoms, and they have a name in common, and they have a kind of pedigree in common, and they have the period in common, but they are quite distinct kingdoms. And when one is fading, one kingdom in the east is fading, the western one takes over. So also the economy might be very different in the two cases. What I said earlier, I think that the eastern branch was more local and agricultural oriented, and the western branch was for making part of a bigger world of trade and even international trade. So it's quite distinctive, these two.
There was an excavation done in 95 or 97 or something, when one small Mahisasur Mardani image was found at Ajanta.
Yes, Walter Spink has shown me that. Yes.
And a Roman gold coin.
Yes.
What do you make out of these two finds?
Well, Mahisha Mardani we find all over India in this period, so there's nothing special about that. It would be surprising if there were not a Mahisha Mardani. I mean, these people were carrying these things everywhere, so that is not so surprising. But if there is a Roman coins found there, well, they were objects of value. So if it was not melted down to make some new necklace or earrings, then people kept these things. So it doesn't say very much whether there was contact with the Romans or not at that time. Probably not, because it's there are 200 years in between at least. So I don't think they are very significant facts.
How do we explain, how did this coin reach at Ajanta?
Oh, there are a million ways that it can be reached at Ajanta. Ajanta was a rich place. It was connected to trade routes, as I said. So coinage, of course, was part of this international trade. So that coinage might have reached in this way.
Who are the most prominent Vakataka rulers in terms of art and patronage and economy and political time, whatever perspective we look at?
Well, it depends very much on our sources. I mean, of some people we have much more sources than of others. So because of that, we think they are more prominent. Anyway, for us, they are more prominent. And then I'm thinking in particular of Rudrasena and his wife Prabhavati Gupta, the daughter of Chandra Gupta, and their son Pravakasena, who was king for a long time, and during his reign and during the reign of Prabhavati as a regentess, so the first 50 years of the 5th century, there were great things built in Ramagiri, Mansar, Mandal, so this small area around present-day Nagardhan. So that is very prominent in our sources, and they were probably very prominent people in the history of India. And in the western branch, we have, of course, Harishena, and that's basically all we have. So Harishena was king in the time that the Ajanta caves were excavated. And for the other kings, we do not have very much information. And about Harishena, actually, also we do not know anything at all. He has not that many inscriptions left. I think 2 or so, if I remember well.
Only 3.
And they don't say very much about him or anything. Right? It's only because he was king at the time that the Ajanta caves were excavated. So he's prominent in that respect.
And what is the nature of heritage at Mandal?
Yeah, well, that was the earliest place of the Eastern Vakatakas.
Mhm.
So then we are speaking about before 400, I would think.
Mhm.
And they probably settled there. They must have had their capital Patmapuri in somewhere in that neighborhood, I think.
Mhm.
Later they moved to the north, and they went to the north of what is now Nagpur,
Mhm.
and they went to the surroundings of the Ramagiri.
Mhm.
But the earliest evidence, archaeological evidence we have, comes from Mandal.
Mhm.
And some inscriptions found there, and a collection of very, very, well, what shall I say, original images. Yeah, they have no predecessors to some extent. I mean, they are something new that they have started there.
And what about Pravarpura? What have you found there?
Padmapura, we don't know where that is. Oh, Pravarapura.
Yeah.
Ah, Pravarapura, then we are speaking about, well, it has been my theory in 97 that actually this Hidimba Tekri next to the village of Mansar, that could be Pravarapura. And after that, excavations have begun, and they have proved beyond doubt that this is indeed the site of Pravarapura, because also seals have been found with Pravara on it, and so there's no one questions this anymore, that this actually was Pravarapura. And so Pravarapura was a big residence and palace and a temple complex.
And what about Nagardhan and Ramtek? What have you found there in terms of archaeological heritage?
I think that, well, in Nagardhan, that is a village at the moment, and there have been no excavations, or hardly any excavations in Nagardhan. But in Ramagiri, of course, everything is still visible. I think Ramagiri is actually the product of Prabhavati Gupta, because it's Vaishnava. She brought Vaishnavism to the region, and she started this big project, like her father in Udaigiri. She started a similar thing in Ramagiri when she came to Vidarbha as queen of the Vakatakas.
Professor Bakker, I wanted to learn from you what was the attitude of the Vakatakas towards the Buddhists.
Well, we can only indirectly answer that question, I think. But it seems that they had no problems with Buddhism at all, despite the fact that they were Shaivas or Bhagavatas. In the Eastern Vakataka realm, some beautiful Buddhist bronzes have been found, not far from Nagardhan. So that seems to signify that there was a Buddhist community living near the capital, Nagardhan and Pravarapura and Ramagiri, without any problems, it seems. On the other hand, we have the evidence of Adyanta, which is Buddhist monument. And as I said earlier in this interview, the king himself, Harishena, does not seem to have been a Buddhist. We have no evidence for that, not in his inscriptions, but he accepted Buddhist as part of Indian religions, and so when his courtiers wanted to sponsor and patronize a Buddhist excavation or a Buddhist monastery or whatever, they could go ahead with that. So I think they were part of a bigger whole, and there was no great animosity between them as far as we know, at least.
Then what happened after the collapse of the Vakatakas? Why were these monuments in Aurangabad and Banoti and Bagh and many Buddhists, or even let us say Bagh also, they were desecrated? It appears that they were suddenly...
I don't know whether Bagh fell together. I mean, that was the wrong stone. I think that was the reason why Bagh collapsed. Adyanta preserved because it's a different type of stone. And I don't think they were desecrated, they were simply forgotten. And in Bagh there was a catastrophe because this rock in which the cave was cut
Actually,
eventually fell down.
Actually, there is some evidence which I have also checked,
Yes.
and as Professor Spink also has documented, as if there is a lot of evidence as if some work was abruptly abandoned.
Well, that's another thing.
So-
Of course, there might have been some historical upheaval at the time, and the dynasty came to an end.
A feeling is coming in my mind
Yes.
as a small researcher that the Vakatakas collapse, the king or empire collapses, but these religious places are made by people. Why should a religious place be just abandoned like that? Especially when we have no evidence of the direct patronage of the people.
Well, that is.
And
yeah.
why it happened with these Buddhists in Aurangabad? There is
Yeah.
and Banoti I have seen,
Yeah.
Ajanta I have seen.
Yeah.
So I particularly want to learn from you about this sociological condition during the Vakatakas. During your research, have you found anything that there was?
Well, sociologically, I don't know, but I'm sure that there was. I mean, the whole Gupta period came to an end in the 5th century, and they were part of that. So they were part of a world that was fastly disappearing at the end of the 5th century. And with the Guptas, the Vakatakas disappeared as well. So, what are the causes for the fall of the Gupta Empire? Well, that has been much discussed. That's another discussion. But they were part of that world, and that world was changing by the end of the 5th century. And some monuments continue to be important. I mean, Ajanta was eventually forgotten until it was rediscovered. Baak had difficulties because the rock was not firm enough, so things were falling down. It was probably abandoned. But the Ramagiri, the monuments on the Ramagiri are still in worship after 1500 years, and they have been in worship all the time, from 500 till the present day.
Continuously.
Continuously.
There is evidence.
Yes, we have, there is an 8th century temple at the foot of the Ramagiri, so there was still some new religious things built in that period. And of course we have the Yadavas who came there in the 11th, 12th and 13th century. And they took over the heritage from the Vakatakas and built new temples on the same spot. So Ramagiri has been a holy place and religious place for 1500 years continuously.
What about era and calendar? What kind of year reckoning they had? Guptas had their own regnal eras.
Yeah, but also the Vakatakas had their regnal years. Yeah.
But they did not follow an era.
No, I think there is one or two inscriptions they are probably be to ascribe to the Shaka era of the western grounds of the Vakatakas.
But they did not stamp their own calendar.
No, they did not, as far as we know. There was just the regnal years.
Do you remember which are these two inscriptions?
I think one with the two with this dam that was built near Vatsaruma. That name of the inscription.
Hisebora?
Yeah, yes, Hisebora. There, I think there is a Shaka deity.
Shaka era is there.
There's a Shaka era.
Another one is by Harisana himself near Dhulia. That is also dated in the Shaka era.
Okay, all right.
As far as I know.
Okay, but most of them are regnal years.
But that's not Vikram Samvat at all.
No, definitely not. No.
Sir, please tell me one thing, that Shaka era found more favors with the Buddhist population, and among the Hindus it was the Vikram Samvat. Was it not so?
Well, maybe in certain places it was so, but it was not in the area where you are talking about. Even I think the Ajanta inscriptions, they are using regnal years for dating.
Yeah. And what about the cities at the height of the Vakatakas, whether it is this branch or that branch? Can we imagine that there were large cities at all?
No, not in the sense of as we know cities. No, I don't think so. No. I think that it was the palace and the main monastery that was made of brick. That was the center of a settlement, and around it a lot of people were probably living, but not in Paka buildings. So that has all gone.
What about the architecture that we see painted in Ajanta paintings?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if the world outside is not existing, how
No,
would...
no, I'm not saying that the world outside is not. What you see in Ajanta paintings are palace court scenes,
Mhm.
and that existed.
Palaces
Palaces and-
existed.
Yes,
Right.
of course. And that has been even found. I mean, the Pravarapura is
Like the
palace.
Baroda Palace. Yeah.
Well, it's,
Yeah, and for the
Yeah.
people are just starving or something like that, and but the palace would be huge.
No, I'm not saying that they
No.
were starving. I don't think it was a bad time, actually. I think it was a very good time to live in the 5th century, a very happy period. You can see in the art, it's a happy form of expressions, happy, a content form of living. So I don't think that it is poverty, it's simply that the houses of the majority of the people were not made of bricks.
Mm.
And so we don't have any evidence of it. But what was made of bricks, at least in Vidarbha, that was the palace of the king. And that has been excavated, and that is what is represented in Ajanta caves.
So what can you tell us about the relationship of the Vakatakas with early Kalachuris and Kadambas and Munuputras and others?
Well, I think I don't see any relationship with the Vakatakas and the Kalachuris, actually. I don't know. I don't know whether we have any evidence of that. They were clearly later than the Vakatakas,
Mhm.
and they were partly in the same area as the Vakatakas, of course, at least of the Western Vakatakas.
Mhm.
But whether there was any relationship or not, I find very difficult to say. I don't know it. No.
Like one of the
Kadambas, well, the Kadambas to the south, they might have been, they were contemporaneous, so there was an exchange with the Kadambas.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Pallavas were not there yet.
No, not yet. No, not in that area. No.
Sir, one of the theories about Kalidasa
Yeah.
is that he was there even for a brief while in the court of the Vakat, one of the...
Yes.
Is it, do you subscribe? What is
Well,
your view?
that is thinkable.
Yeah.
He must have known that court probably quite well. He was certainly living in the first half of the 5th century, so he might have known the court of the Guptas and the court of the Vakatakas.
Do you
whether
think he
lived
might
there-
have? Do you think he might have travelled with Prabhavati Gupta?
We cannot exclude that. That is a possibility.
Just for an excursion or something like
Well,
she comes and some important people come along with her like that.
That might be possible.
Oh.
And there's a lot of evidence that Pravarasena, her son, was a poet himself. And so there is a tradition that says that he learned it, the poetry and kavya from Kalidasa, which is not by itself unlikely because Kalidasa is certainly the senior of Pravarasena, but they might have been partly contemporaneous, so that could be in tradition. That's,
Sir, what
yeah.
was the condition of the development of science during those times? Do you have any clues to that?
Well, I mean, if you look at the way they have built their monuments,
Mm-hmm.
so either the caves in Ajanta or the monuments that have been found on the Ramagiri and around the Ramagiri, they were excellent craftsmen. They were truly very good craftsmen. So they used all the techniques necessary to make first class of what we would call art. They would probably not call it art, but simply images, murtis for devotion to God. But they were excellent craftsmen. For the rest, I have to think whether we have any information on their knowledge of sciences. I would not. So
We find a
Yeah.
reference
yeah.
that Aryabhatta
Yeah.
was born in the Ashmaka country,
Yes.
and his date of birth
Yeah.
is generally regarded as 463 AD.
Yes.
There is one reference I have found recently. So I was wondering whether there was a school of astronomy
Yes.
in the Ashmaka country
Yes.
where Aryabhatta learnt it, and then what we know for sure that he writes his Aryabhattyam
Yeah.
in Kusumpura, that is Patliputra, which is the date at the age of 21.
Okay.
You know, so what is widely recognized is that he was there in Patliputra in Magad,
Yes.
and he had his laboratory
Yes.
in Taregana, in a place called Taregana, and then another place called Khagol. Khagol, that is the galaxy.
Yes.
And both are just within 100 kilometers from Patliputra,
Yes.
modern Patliputra. In fact, that is my native place.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And last year, for some solstice or some comet was passing, and the entire world's people had come over there, these small villages, and then the Bihar government came to know, oh, it's supposed to be an important place, which is
Yeah.
Aryabhatta. So Aryabhatta certainly came
Yeah.
into popular imagination that time last year. But I found a reference that Aryabhatta was not born in Magad, he was born in the Ashmaka country.
Okay.
And then at the age of 21 he writes his Aryabhattyam,
Yeah.
and so he probably was there a school of astronomy over there in Ashmaka country. Have you found any reference?
No, I can be very short.
What was
on
the
that
system
question.
of education?
I don't know anything about that. I don't know. I have not come across evidence regarding this aspect. No. Could well be. We know only very little.
Sir, before we have your, I would say, monumental work, that Hindu iconology, the Vakatakas and Buddhists, 1997, and then again in 2004, the symposium that you had in Groningen, the Vakataka heritage. These two are landmark contributions to the ongoing Vakataka studies. Before that, we had Ajay people like Ajay Mutra Shastri and V.V. Mirashi. Then before that, we had Yazdani, and then A.S. Altekar, etc. So I wanted to know from you, from the angle of historiography, how do we evaluate today the relevance of the research of these people?
Well, we should be grateful that these people did this research because we are building on their work. But as it goes in science, I mean, some results are permanent, but most of them are replaced by later results and other theories. So their work is still very useful and as an introduction and as a basis of all knowledge of Vakatakas. But of course, it's not the latest point of view, and the latest point of view is changing every day. So they are the shoulders on which we are standing.
Is there anything in current research which still owes very heavily to Altekar?
Well, Altekar was of course one of the very first to develop the theory of the Golden Age and Gupta Vakataka period and the connection between the Vakatakas and the Guptas. So that is still valid. I mean, that has been proven by the later historiography that there was indeed a close relationship between the Guptas and the Vakatakas. So in that sense, it is still very important.
Is Mirashi still valid?
Yes, Mirashi more than Altekar because Mirashi was doing editions of inscriptions. So he was actually publishing sources. Altekar was talking about sources, but Mirashi was publishing sources. So these publications of the sources itself, the inscriptions, this corpus, that is on our desk all the day, all the time when we work on the Vakat.
And what about Ajay Mitra Shastri?
Well, he is, in a way, he is a successor to Mirashi. So he has done a lot of work in the line of Mirashi, publishing new found inscriptions. He never told me about Mirashi actually at Mitra Shastri. Of course they must have known each other quite well, but I don't know exactly what their relationship
Did you
was.
work with Shastri?
Yes, I did.
Ah.
Yes, with Shastri I did, but for Mirashi I came too late. Mirashi,
To what extent would you accept Shastri's research?
Well, I think it's a very good Indian tradition of epigraphy, and as such he is a good successor to Mirashi, who is, I estimate, as one of the major Indian epigraphists, together with Siakar. And Adhyay Mitra Shastri certainly belong to these two. So these three people are major Indian epigraphists of, say, the 20th century. Yes, certainly. And very important today, even for all the work done on Vakatakas, because they publish the sources.
In your self-assessment, if I may ask, how do we evaluate the significance of your research about the Vakatakas?
Well, history will tell, and I can't say anything about that. I mean, that is a very difficult question. History will tell what is of value and what is not of value. I did publish only a few inscriptions of the Vakatakas. I think they will last. I did, for instance, the publication edition of the inscription found in the Kevala Narasimha temple in the Ramagiri, which is by the daughter, probably by the daughter of Prabhavati Gupta. That edition will, I think, be useful for a longer period. Well, that is the major thing.
And what is your current research focus? Which is the area which is occupying you?
Well, as I said in the beginning of this interview, we are interested in the history of this Pashupata religion, Shaiva religion, and that seems to have started in the south of Gujarat, actually in this area where we are sitting at the moment. And I think it spread through western and northern India along trade routes. They were, in my mind, they were imitating the Buddhist practice. So they were settling and connecting to places where there was trade, where there was money, and where they could live and attract much of attention. So they spread in a similar way as the Buddhist religion spread. And to do research in that subject, actually, that is what I'm presently doing.
Professor Bakker, thank you so much for your views on the subject of the Vakatakas.
It was a pleasure.